All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of On Location with Bowen and Mimi. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge with gratitude that we are living on the unceded ancestral lands of the Sylix Okanagan people. Today, Bowen and I get to sit down with Yania Greenaway. Ta-da! Yay! Yania was born in Mexico City, and when she was 2.5, moved to Toronto with her Mexican father, Jorge, and her Polish-Canadian mother, Betty. Yania has lived a very, it's a journey of exploration. She worked in hospitality in Toronto, traveled the world, lived in Japan, hung out with elephants in Sumatra, spent some time with orangutans in Borneo. Like, there's a lot of stories in that.
So fun.
Right?
So fun.
In 2001, Yania made Vernon, BC her home, where she met her husband, Rob, and raised her son, Ben, and has continued to keep life super interesting, I would say, in Vernon. Yania has worked in alternative healthcare and in education since being in Vernon, and at this time is currently running her own bookkeeping services. Whew.
All true.
Yeah, all true.
All true.
This is a good start. No fake news here.
No fake news.
Yeah, so welcome, Yania.
Thank you.
And thanks for making time for us on this. Yeah, you're so busy.
Yeah, we're all busy.
Yeah.
Oh, we all think we're busy.
Yeah.
Right?
This is
I'm not sure which is true.
It's 50-50, somewhere. It's a mix.
We pretend.
It's a mix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
It feels like it's true.
Yeah. Can we start with you sharing a bit of growing up in Toronto? Mexican father, Polish Canadian mother.
Yeah, I so lucky. I always say really good food, right? Like my house was full. Also, it was like the 70s, 80s. We didn't have the money to go out all the time, so you didn't get your ethnic food out. You got your ethnic food at home or with your friends, right? I grew up in Mississauga, and everyone had like grandparents at home that didn't speak English. Every household smelled exactly like where they were from, right?
Yeah.
And the food, you'd go over to someone's house and you'd get food you didn't know before, and that was really fun, right? Like there were some really neat things about, and that was normal. Like it was just normal. So being Polish Mexican didn't feel odd or weird, although it's both, maybe. But right, so we'd have tacos, and then we'd have pierogies, and then we'd have pork chops, right? Like it was all just very normal.
Yeah. Can you describe your neighborhood?
I lived in like one of those newly built townhouse complexes where everything was brick. And I think I was lucky. Like some of them were like big, like kind of like mazes. We lived in one that was sort of candy cane shaped. Like it was kind of exciting. And we moved in. It wasn't landscaped yet, so the back was all field, and it was kind of zoned to be a greenland. So it was field, like there were rabbits and birds and milkweed, and so that was kind of a free landscape but that's as rural as it got for me, right? Like there was also condominiums everywhere and strip malls and lots of buses, and it was city.
Yeah.
It was city.
I know you've been back a few times. Have you gone back to that neighborhood?
Yeah, I always tour for a long time. My favorite uncle and aunt lived there, and we always kind of drive through the old neighborhoods, like kind of on our way to somewhere else now. And it's weird, right? You don't, it never occurred to me to stay in Mississauga. I don't know why. Like I didn't actually have a plan for getting out, but it never occurred to me that my life would be staying there or coming back there. Really, ever.
Do you ever miss like the big city kind of side of things, or like because you've been here a while,
Yeah. So like when I did graduate, I didn't. A lot of my friends went away for school. I didn't ever think we had the money for that. So for me, I actually was accepted into Ryerson, so that was great. But that meant I was, busing and commuting the subways. I miss the subways. I miss the people. I miss that kind of just collage or mosaic of people in your constant day, right? Here you get this, like you run into people which is a completely different bonus, right? But it's I do miss the anonymity of it and the constant visual stimulation or of art or even media, right? But just of different ideas and speaking to different audiences, right? Like there's such a complexity of layers in a bigger city, or at least that's what feels like it's in front of your face.
Mm.
So yeah, I miss that. Or I miss, like, I like going back and riding the subway and going to the neighborhoods and just feeling that. You guys know that, right?
Yeah,
You know
I would
that,
say I miss the same things. Yeah.
you know that place, right? So I'm so grateful not to, like, by happenstance, I left. Like, I never planned to leave Toronto or Ontario, probably even really.
Mm.
By, you know, family happenstance, I did, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful not to have had to actually make a life there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I lived there in a time when I was naive and young enough to still kind of just enjoy it and not really be grounded in the realities of making a living and commuting and trying to get ahead, or like, and never mind have a kid and try to do all that.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to have landed here for sure.
Well, you have an adventurous spirit. So I can't imagine you staying in one place. For a long time
This
like
is
that.
the longest, like, I can't believe I've been here this, like, 24 years. It's a whole lifetime.
Wow.
Wow.
You have mentioned to me before that you lived also close to your grandmother and that you were close.
Yeah, she lived more Toronto than we did. You know, like, Mississauga was a new suburb at the time we moved into it, kind of thing. In the, when would that have been? Like 76, 1977-ish, 6, 7 maybe. So she lived, you know, in a very Ukrainian Polish settled area on Bloor Street. You know, so on the subway line or just off the subway line. So it was easy for my mother to take me there and go to work, or, you know, like, she did a lot of childcare for my parents. And I entered kind of the world. I mean, she spoke English with a lot of Polish isms. And, but again, you know, she had a backyard garden and she was older and had lived a harder life. So had the older body, you know, like of a true kind of grandmother, or I don't know, not true grandmother, but you know what I mean, of a stereotypical grandmother.
Right.
With the babushka when we went out, you know, like with the handkerchief on her head and the, you
To
know,
Ed's
like,
department store, or
not quite that far, but yes. I was thinking about Ed the other day. That's funny, but yes, right? Like, so, you know, I was beside her. I was at that great age where I was beside her in the garden and beside her shopping in the butcher and the, you know, like, so I loved all that. And we played cards and watched soap operas in the afternoon because she was tired and needed a rest, right? Like,
right.
And you know, but I would sleep over there and all those things. So in some ways, you know, my parents worked very hard. They came back to Canada with nothing really. So,
your father was Mexican and your mom Canadian.
Yeah.
So how did they meet?
Yeah. So they met. My mom in her mid-20s went on a tour. So Acapulco was like the hot spot in Mexico in the early 70s, or right, late 60s, early 70s. And she went on a Christmas vacation that did 3 days in historical Mexico City and 4 days in Acapulco, kind of thing, right? It was a tour. And she met my father at the top of the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan. And that was their magical moment.
I don't know that story. That's quite amazing.
Yeah, so my mom, you know, both my grandparents came from Poland. My mother was born in 43, like wartime kind of Toronto. And so, you know, in immigrant poverty, for sure, like their family struggled for sure to eat and to have stuff. So she probably never thought she would leave Toronto either. And then she met this man in Mexico City and she decided, I think that was her portal out. Like,
well, quite a portal.
Yeah, quite a portal.
Do you know the actual story, like how that played out, that they're on top of this pyramid? And
yeah, they kind of saw each other. I don't know if they had a conversation up there. I don't, he saw her. I don't know. Like, all I know really of the story is that he traded shifts with another guy in their tour group so that he could follow her tour to Acapulco. And then they had their first date in Acapulco, and he had to, my mom was there with a friend. I mean, it was kind of, they were very, it's hard for us to understand, right? But it was like, she needed a chaperone. She felt like she needed a chaperone. Like, he asked her out for dinner. She was not going to go out with her friend. My dad had to find a date for her friend. It turns out he was married, but that was, you know, that was all just to make it all happen. Those things, right? Like, it's kind of like they're kind of old world stories for us now, right? Our world, our concept of everything has
not
shifted
online
so much.
dating.
Not online dating, not taking risks. Like, the risks were different. I don't know. Innocence. I don't know. Like all those, I don't want to say values, but those belief systems around things, right?
Wow.
Did you have like a very like specific kind of strict plan that you wanted to stick to when you were my age, or was it like still trying to like?
No, in fact, like I've always been ridiculously jealous of the people who know what they want to do, like yourself, even, right? Like who from very early on found a passion and could see a road. I had never had that. Like I had a best friend in high school who, would get up at 6, like who loved to kayak. Like she learned to kayak, she loved to kayak. She would do anything to kayak. And I had a high school boyfriend that was a hockey player. Like he would get up at 6. I had nothing I would loved enough to get up at 6 a.m. for. I didn't really like my life didn't get led by that sort of those pieces. I knew I loved people. I knew I liked being around people, working with people. So I went into social work, which turned out not to be a fantastic decision for me. But that's sort of like that's kind of like the only equation I knew how to make at that point. Right?
Is that what you had studied? You went to
my first degree that I attempted.
Yeah,
my first attempted degree.
That's okay. Yeah, I don't know if I've talked to you about that before.
Was a social work degree because I knew I wanted to do people, and like no one was even, you couldn't get into teaching college in Ontario at that time. Like it was sort of flooded. It was one of those rhythms where there was too many teachers kind of thing. So I didn't even think of that. And I didn't love the sciences enough to be a nurse. And that sort of felt like the only 3 options. Like kind of weird, right? Like I wasn't, And I did well in school. So everyone expected me to go to university. I don't know that that was truly the best plan, but
so what was it that took you out of that program? You weren't able to complete it.
So this funny little story, I think I'm kind of like my mom, like I go along until like this big adventure kind of hits in front of me and then I think, sure, I'll go. So in high school I was a lifeguard. That was sort of my job and I did it for a long time and loved it. And so then in university I got a job at the Four Seasons as a lifeguard. And then from there I'd been through my first year of social work and I probably was starting to have doubts about it as a match, but I couldn't quite conceptualize like how big it would be to like tell people I was not going to do this. Or like I couldn't even form that. So I took a year off. But to take a year off, I needed a job. And so I got a job at the front desk at Four Seasons. And then one day I was in the change room. There's these funny little moments in the back of those kinds of places, right? In movies you see it, like it's all grand on the front side and on the back it's like barely painted and there's pipes everywhere. Like, right? Yeah. So I'm in this like really awful little change room with a girl I work with and we were changing shifts. And so I was putting on nylons and she was taking off nylons and she's like, I have to tell you something. And I said, what? She's like, I'm going to go upstairs and quit because I'm going to go to Japan. And I was like, what? What do you mean you're going to go to Japan? Like it was kind of, again, a way bigger thought than I was having about my own life at the time. And so she had like in 45 seconds kind of told me her plan. And then at the end of it, she's like, do you want to come? I was like, what would that look like? And so in like another 45 seconds, she told me, I was like, yeah. And then I like spent my entire shift in the background in my brain, sort of planning how I would go home and tell someone I was doing that.
Those were the long shifts.
My overprotective, beautiful Mexican father who loved me a lot, but would prefer if I never left the radius.
Yeah.
And my really practical mother who, didn't had kind of too much trauma to be so imaginative about that sort of thing. And so, So
how did that conversation go?
I have no memory of the actual conversation. I think that they would say, this is what I think that they would say about that conversation, is that I came home and announced it. Like by that point, I was just...
You had to rally yourself.
That's sort of how I go forward in the world, right? I take these sort of slightly out of the box ideas for myself and then just make it inarguable that that's what I'm doing.
Right. And the young lady that you heard about going to Japan, did you go together with her or did you meet up with her there? Or how did that play out?
That was the plan. I mean, she was my safety net, right? Because she had actually, her father had been there when she was a teen. Like they lived there as and she spent a year living there when she was a teen. So she was going back to somewhere she had familiarity with. This is all pre-internet, so you don't go being able to ask Google anything or have any sense of where you are at any given time, or right. So she was my safety net, and went through this big process to get a working holiday visa to Japan and all these things. And I didn't, at the time, all kinds of people went to Japan to teach English, right? But they got hired here, and then all that was taken care of them because I was going with her. We skipped all that. And then like 2 weeks before we left, she didn't get her visa. So no, I went alone with a little scrap of piece of paper.
Crazy, wow.
So crazy. I went with a little scrap of paper with her instructions from the airport to somewhere I should be able to stay that night.
She must have been pretty bummed about that.
Yeah, she arrived because her plan was to get transferred with the Four Seasons. Like she wasn't kind of going by the seat of her pants that time, right? Like she had a plan.
Yeah.
And so she arrived like 6 months later and was working for the Four Seasons. And I remember having lunch, and by that time, I'd settled into what was going to be my experience in Japan. But those first few weeks were nuts.
Did you try learning any Japanese while you?
Oh yeah, we all do. Like you buy the books, and you guys, and you learn. I learned enough to be able to recognize certain words, to order food. I got hired by a publishing company that they sold like workbooks to schools, and then with those workbooks they provided a teacher, right? So because kids still do, I'm sure, learn English in school in Japan, but in their after school schools, their juku schools, they have a native teacher, right? Because they don't have a native English speaker, right? So they don't practice speaking the words, or they didn't at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was all about like that, playing games with words, like awesome, which I actually really loved. I taught kindergarten kids, and I taught kids probably your age trying to get into university or pass English exams in university. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. It was a great stretch of kids, and different, like I got to go to different, like Thursdays I was at one school and Wednesdays I was at another school. So I was in different parts of Tokyo every day. Mm-hmm. And that was neat too, because I wouldn't have explored that much of Tokyo. Mm-hmm. Otherwise I was in real neighborhoods and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I was lost a lot. I gotta say, lost in Tokyo a lot.
When you came back from Japan, you went back to Toronto?
Yes.
And did you go back into post-secondary education again?
I tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for social work again, or for something different?
No, I went back to my social work degree, and I did 2.5 more years of it. And it was hard. I think when you haven't, like, again, maybe not so much now. I think by the time you get to 20 now, you're exposed to so many different things that it's, whether you've just through media, right? That you, even though you haven't personally experienced them, you are aware. Like there's a totally different awareness of, I don't know, self, I think. I felt like I went to Japan really naive, but it was this great, like, independent experience, and it was safe. And I came back to like my childhood bedroom in my parents' house, where dinner was still at the same time, and nothing had changed there. And it was like, there was way more culture shock coming back from a trip like that, or experience like that, than there was going to Japan. Actually, I think I like hit a brick wall in myself. Like it was really tough. And I went back to school, and social work is a heart wrenching, hard reality, I think, anywhere, right? In of life. And all those things I didn't have the maturity to deal with all of those things. So those couple of years were really difficult. And eventually I met someone who said, you ready? I'm driving to Vancouver 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And I'm going to live here, and we're going to do this. And I was like, okay.
For those of us who don't know what our destiny is, this is what happens.
Well, you kind of say, it's like I was never quite brave enough to make a plan to get myself out of things, I think. But I was certainly brave enough to hook on to someone else's plan and land somewhere and see what happened. So I left, because by that point I was working, I was back in university, but I was working at the Seven Place Hotel. And so I left that job to go to Vancouver. I ended up in Vancouver for like 3 months and went, oh yeah, no, I'm not loving this. And I went back to Toronto, but didn't pretend I was going back to school. I just worked, but the Seven Place rehired me. And I worked full time for a while and lived downtown.
But had a taste of BC and
I had a
kind
taste
of
of
then
BC.
knew, okay.
Once upon a time, I had a dream, like in high school, to come out to UVic to study law, and my parents and I had done a trip out here, and they had fallen in love with the Okanagan. So that trip was less about me planning to go to UVic and way more about it turned out, right? Like that's what happened to them is they decided this was their retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
So seeds were sown.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's like, so on the timeline of your life here, then you've come back from Japan, you've gone to Vancouver, you're back in Toronto now.
Yeah, we've only gotten me to like 25. Like I'm
Really?
halfway through my life.
So and then, because then you moved here in 2001, right?
Yeah, I was 28.
You were 28. So what's the middle gap in between?
The dark years.
Yeah.
Your 20s. I was watching something recently, like some stupid show, but they did a great job. Like this girl's kind of apologizing for not being mature enough or whatever, or not having it together, and she's in her 20s, and these, much older people say like, well, that's what your 20s are for, but no one told me that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had expectations of having my crap together, and I really didn't. So I spent a couple more years in Toronto, kind of just really working and playing it, working. I mean, I worked hard. We worked 10 hours. Like once I went into management at the front desk, and those were 10, 11-hour days, and so it's not like, but that sort of just kind of consumed my life. And I worked and played in the city, right, in Kensington Market or on College Street or down at the lake or whatever. I was just not making plans.
Yeah.
I was not making plans. At one point, I decided that maybe I should go back to school, and I spent a semester trying to explore a poli-sci degree, but like my work life and my play life were too big to take that seriously, and I just let it go. And then I met someone, and they were related to someone I was really good friends with, and me trying to keep it all so anonymous. So funny. Anyways, he was a farmer. He was like, he'd grown up on a farm, and he was never going to leave the farm. He worked at the mill in the town. Like it was kind of like I'd met someone from Lumbee, right? And so, but there was some sort of spark there, and in all honesty, I think I just really hit I have no clue. Like all the plans all the minute visions I'd seen for my life, like getting a degree or traveling, like I'd done it, and it still hadn't worked into something lasting. So I was at a loss of what was next. And my parents by this time had been out here, and my dad was sick, and I wasn't quite ready to dive into that. Honestly, I couldn't quite grasp that piece yet. And so I moved on the farm in Ontario, rural Ontario.
Right.
It was just this weird year. It was a weird year.
Okay, so there you are alone in this giant garden, realizing, okay, maybe this is not what I really wanted. And then someone comes up and says, hey, you know what I was thinking of doing?
Yeah, no, that one I got to on my own. I was like, at a certain point, the relationship had disintegrated. Like, we couldn't pretend anymore.
Yeah.
And I just kind of needed out. And my dad had declined enough, and my mother was like, I'm going to come get you. And I was actually at a place where I was like, okay. And she flew out, and we drove across the country together to come back here. So that was interesting. It was like a bit of a reset for her and I. I don't know. It was a reset. It didn't take, we kind of never had the relationship I think either of us wanted, but we did have moments. We did have little moments of time in our history together that were connective, and that was one of them for sure. And then I met Rob.
I was going to say, this could be where Rob comes in.
And then I had this crazy day.
Well, didn't it have something to do with your accident?
Yeah,
and that you both had trauma due to accidents.
Serious accidents.
Yeah.
Well, no, but we didn't know that then. Well, because we met on the Saturday, and I didn't have my accident until the Thursday. Yeah. Life, right? Like it never quite goes the way. Like I actually have come to envy the people that had a plan, but also have compassion for them, because like a lot happens to a plan when you make it.
Well, it never goes how you.
No, a lot can
want
mess
to,
with the plan. So if you're really stuck to it, it's a hard road too, right?
Yeah. That will definitely be a journey for me, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. Plans are just say yes, stay open, be flexible. I don't know. Yeah, I met Rob at a local store in line when the POS machine broke down, and because I had like 1,000 years of customer service and trying to be funny in times of discomfort, I turned around to make some joke because the line was getting really long behind me as the poor new girl was trying to fix it. Those moments, those really silly human moments. And I turned around and it was -20. It was one of those Vernon days where it was -20, and so like everyone was like this with the cheeks here. And I turned around and he had his jacket here and his toque to here, and he had those gorgeous blue eyes. And I was like, oh, you. Like, that is literally the thought I had. And, I was 33 and had gone through a bunch of all this stuff and was, deeply wondering if I'd ever partner. And so, yeah, we had this funny little awkward moment, right? This big, powerful, awkward moment. And we had a couple of dates. We had the coffee date and we had the listening to him open. He was at an open mic and I went to that. And then we had the talk till 3 a.m. date. And then I was hit by Semi.
Damn. Yeah, what to do? But
Right?
to laugh at this point.
Like, well, you have to, right?
Really
like, I mean, obviously I survived, and obviously, like, again, like this big traumatic experience that turned out like way better than I,
so all the rest of your
imagined.
first dates were around your hospital bed?
Kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah, between the hospital and like he moved in. I mean, moved in. He was at my place. There was no me going out. So, we both kind of, again, a huge bubble. I was living the euphoria of I survived. It was a huge snowstorm that, I will never drive in again. I shouldn't have been driving in. We all should say no to. I don't know what to say about that exactly. It isn't completely fear driven, but we all have those moments. And, the police officer came to the hospital and apologized to me for not coming to the scene of the accident because, he was triaging his own day and I was the single motor vehicle accident against a Semi. So he just assumed that, right? So, when you have a police officer apologize to you for that, you're like, oh, right, I wasn't supposed to live here and yet I did. So the euphoria of being alive and the painkillers, and of meeting this person who like had already wowed me in all those first ways, and then who'd come to the ER and stuck around, and so he was grateful that I was willing to have him around, and I was grateful that he stuck around, and and then and I couldn't move and I couldn't work and I couldn't, and there was bones to heal and things to discover about this new me.
Yeah. So did your world become about you and Rob and the healing from this event? And where did your mom fit into that, if at all? Or
yeah, she went into complete denial. And she was already kind of a little bit losing reality. And I wasn't, my world did very much, when you're healing or in that much chronic pain, your day doesn't really get itself going until somewhere around noon, and it sort of stops around 3. Like you don't, you pain manage to be able to do the one thing, maybe not on a bad day, and then you kind of wait for the day to be done. Like it becomes very insular and very small, like very myopic, I guess, right? And I lost sight of where my mother was at, and she certainly wasn't present. Like it's like life took us into our own little capsules, and by the time I was a little bit better, like a year and a half later, I was pregnant, and we were getting married, and I could look a little bit beyond myself and our day-to-day struggles. I mean, I couldn't work very much. There was a recession. Rob was, it was like it was a mess.
Yeah.
It was a mess in all those practical ways, right?
Right.
It was not a mess in all those real, authentic, emotionally supporting, wonderful ways, but on practical levels, it was a total mess. And so by the time I could look up and sort of even try to map where my mother was, she was lost.
Mm-hmm. At a certain point, you get into alternative healthcare.
Then.
So I'm just wondering if it's tied into this experience, and how did Body Talk come to you, or was that the first modality that you tried, or?
No, I think I actually, I have my mother, I'm going to go back to Toronto really quickly, but my mother in her own health struggles and stuff, she had found meditation and then Qigong, and she was, she was looking for ways to manage her own chronic pain, and she found she found a chiropractor that was doing applied kinesiology, so that was kind of like the edge of woo at the time, right? But was looking beyond, look to communicate with the body in a different way, to recognize its more holistic functioning, and then of course Chinese medicine has been around forever, right? In ways so that so she'd done some exploring, and I'd sort of paralleled a little bit of that road trip across. When I say we listened to Carolyn Mace is a medical intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Her first book really maps out a very different way of, at the time, a very different way of looking at the connection between
Anatomy of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Is that the one? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had that on cassette tape.
Oh.
And it was, it was a really beautiful thing to share. There was this kind of vein of things that my mother and I could meet at, that didn't exist in practical life so much, but
were really powerful and
but
important.
were super powerful and important. And actually about 3 to 4 months. So the whole time I was living in Vernon, I was seeing an osteopath that practiced in Armstrong for like the scar tissue I had in my body around the meningitis and around the horse accident, and around the scar tissue of my early abdominal surgeries and blah, blah, blah. And he actually turned me on to my first Body Talk practitioner. He said, she does things really differently, but I think you can handle it. And what she's doing with the brain, and what she's doing, what he had seen of the things she was doing and the conversations she was bringing to him. She's like, he said, I think you should go see her. And so that was my first, and that was like 2 months before my accident, 2 months before I met Rob. It's kind of a really heightened time in my world. I was doing some personal growth stuff, in community and in Kelowna and stuff, and so some healing, kind of emotional healing work in that way. And then I'd been introduced to Body Talk. And so actually the first thing I did kind of post healing was get my certification to be a practitioner, but mostly because I just wanted to learn it all. And
you're an experiential learner. I'm just thinking back to the times of the social work and the institutions and how that did not work, but you love learning.
I love learning.
You just love to learn it in your way, which is not in...
Yeah, like I was very good at traditional schooling. My brain worked that way. And I was really good at being a good girl, like in those ways, right? Like
performance.
The performance piece I was very good at. And without knowing how much that actually, how much you pay in your own self for that performance piece, I know where I is of that. So, but yes, I'm an experimental learner. So I just dove right in and learned everything I could about that. And
do you know much about that Body Talk practice?
Not a lot, no.
It's an energy healing modality that looks at the community, at restoring, reconnecting all the communication lines in your body. I mean, we function cell to cell through communication, right? It's like, I can say it now and you nod your head and we get it. Like 10, 12, 20 years ago, that was like ridiculous. How could that be true? That your emotions affect your physical, or your mind, thoughts affect your emotions. Or, it's pre a whole lot of research and paradigm shifting, right? So
I would love to talk a little bit about how you were also a surrogate, if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Because that was another huge act of service that I was able to witness, and I don't know anyone else who's done that before. So.
Yeah, again, if we, in the way that we paint me as someone who just takes an opportunity when the train comes along, so I'm going to have to look at, when's the next train coming? What's the next game? Well, it's funny, you look back and you think, I think the first time I thought about surrogacy at all was when I spent time with a female friend of mine who was brilliant with children, had never partnered and didn't know if she ever would, and was getting older. And I remember thinking, like, if anyone needs to have a child, it would be her, and I would gladly do that for her. Like, it was just kind of, but it's like one of those random thoughts you have doing the dishes or whatever. Like, it was just,
Right.
so I don't know, those thoughts that open up, or some aspect of you that's opening up ahead of time. Does this happen to other people? Who knows? Do I get to know? I don't know. But again, we, in our circle of connections, I knew someone who we're in the kitchen putting dinner together, and she said, I haven't told anyone in my family, but I'm going to be a surrogate. And she was like, kind of this whole experience, because she didn't have anywhere else to put it and share it. Yeah. And I asked 1,000 questions. And then we got in the car, Rob and I got in the car, and Ben was in the back, like, and we're driving home, and I was like, so, and he's like, yeah. And I was like, I have to explore that, right? And he said, yeah. And I was like, I'm just saying, can it be a yes until it's a no? Like, until we find something about it that maybe doesn't work for us, or, would be too hard, or isn't going to happen. Like, maybe I'm not capable of, all those things, right? And he's like, yeah, I know you have to do that. So, I mean, like, that's definitely up there on the beautiful things about my husband.
And then I go back to you standing behind the counter with this guy with this ski mask on and just the blue eyes, and you going, oh, it's you. It's you, that guy who's going to say yes to all these things when you know that that's part of my journey.
Yeah, like, I mean, we can all make a list of things that drive us nuts about our partners. But we won't spend time doing that. But, up there is, I have this incredibly supportive partner who somehow makes room within himself and within our matrix for things that I really need. So we explored how to do that, and we found a couple we wanted to do it for. And it was, Ben was 3. It was challenging in all kinds of ways that I didn't expect. Not on the emotional level, I mean, on the physical level. I thought Ben's, my pregnancy with Ben came right, closely after my accident. He grew my body and healed my body. That experience did a lot for getting through some of those aspects of my healing. And so I naively just assumed that it would go that way the second time, and, not so much. And the IVF process is fascinating. And I have, again, like, these experiences, like, I have so much compassion and so much respect for people who choose that path, who know that they want a child so badly that they, put themselves through that path. That's not an easy path, emotionally, physically, hormonally, financially. Like, it's, the stress on a relationship. Like, we kind of did it in this side path where it wasn't, if this didn't work, it wasn't our dream that was going to fall flat and ruin our it just this way that, again, we had this whole experience in a very protected way in some ways. But it was a marathon. It took 3 takes, and hormonally that's really hard. And poor Rob, by the end of it, he just wanted it to be over, Yeah, I just want my wife back kind of feeling, right? And yeah, it was this incredibly beautiful experience. And we made a family, right? And the men that we created a family for were beautiful people, right? And that was a really beautiful thing to share with our child from the get-go, that love looks like it looks everywhere, right? And so again, that was a huge gift to us. Like, it was definitely a reciprocal gift.
And now, Ben, your son is a teenager. And have you ever had conversations about that time? He was only 3 at the time, or?
He doesn't remember much about it. He has memories of holding our surrogate after. He has, we have visited his family, so there's, open conversation, but like, it's never done to connect ourselves with them, right? Like, we made a family, and they're off on their own journey, right?
Yeah.
And it's, something we can feel good about, grateful for. I'm always curious about her and always all those things, but it really was a complete experience. Like complete in and of itself.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know sometimes you and I will just have that moment of, yeah, you did do that.
Yeah, I did that. Remember that year? Rob did that too. Remember that year we made a family? Yes. Like life is really weird, right? Like when I was, doing the bio, talking about doing this with you, like there's these big things happen in your world, and then life just keeps going, and you don't always reflect back on them, or they are complete. Like if it's our goal at all to live in the moment or be in the present, or all those things, the reality is a lot of what we experience isn't in our present.
Well, it's been a gift to get to sit down and just, hear more of your stories in depth and have a kind of meandering conversation around lots of topics. And it's a gift also to witness your life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel quite honored to have you in my life.
I feel the same way, and I appreciate you saying it. Right, I feel the same way, and I think one of the things, I'm grateful that you guys asked, because I love you, and I'd be happy to always, connect. But I think we all have these stories. Like I think that if because there's a why choose me for this, right? But I think that if anything, we all have a version of this, right? And if we actually sat down to write a bio, it's like when you write a resume and you think, oh yeah, I really can do things. Or you make a budget and you're like, oh yeah, that's why we're broke, right? Like when you write a bio, you're like, wow, like there is a moment of sitting back and recognizing what has worked really well in your life and what has was legitimately painful, and what you got through, what you didn't, what you did well, what you wish you'd done. Those are important.
It's in the, I think you said it. It's in the extraordinary and in the ordinary.
Yeah, that's right. It's doing both, and so life is pretty cool.
Well, any last questions for Yania?
I'm
full.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Yania.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we look forward to the next adventures of your life.
I do too. That's
We don't know what they will be.
What's coming down the pipe next?
Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you again another time.